Lecture 4, Listening. Let us begin with a reading from St. Francis de Sales' Introduction to the Devout Life. Always remember to retire at various times into the solitude of your own heart, even while outwardly engaged in discussions or transactions with others. This mental solitude cannot be violated by the many people who surround you, since they are not standing around your heart, but only around your body. Your heart remains alone in the presence of God. Transformation in spiritual direction comes about through a listening presence. To be effective in what we do as directors, we need a thorough understanding of the dynamics of active listening used in the direction sessions and reflected upon during supervision. And what I'd like to do in this lecture is to go through the various elements involved in active listening. Now, before listing these characteristics, however, we must say something about the proper backdrop against which the process of active listening actually takes place. Now, it's very interesting that as human beings, we are blessed with the power of self-awareness. We are conscious not only of the world around us, but also of ourselves. This ability to look upon ourselves as both object and subject manifests itself in the very structure of human thought. We are aware, and there is a constant dialogue taking place within our minds. And we're asking ourselves at any particular moment such questions like, what do I need to accomplish this day? What are my priorities? Whom do I need to call? Why do I feel stuck? How are others perceiving me? What should I wear? What should I have for breakfast? This internal dialogue of overlapping thoughts and feelings is quite normal and forms the backdrop against which everything else in our lives takes place. Although it will never go away, its level and intensity can be disciplined so that other relevant features of a person's character can come to the fore. And for this reason, it is important that when directing people, we be conscious of the type of conversation that is going on inside of them. It is also important that we take appropriate steps to quiet the inner dialogue within us so that an atmosphere of silence, if not incessant disassociated thinking, will form the primary backdrop for what will take place during the direction process. And the best way for this to happen is for us to make an ongoing effort to foster a contemplative attitude in life. So let us look at the 7 elements of listening. Remember, listening is a gift that we give to the person coming to us for guidance. And the number 1 element, the first element of active listening, is inner awareness. To begin, we need to be aware of the continuing, though diminished presence of the ongoing dialogue that's going on inside each one of us. Although we will never be totally free of the quiet conversation going on inside our heads, we must discipline ourselves to minimize its impact, otherwise we become needlessly distracted. We do so by trying to avert to the intensity from time to time by gauging its appropriateness for our current level of listening. So when we're before a person, that person can also tell if we are truly listening to them or if we are listening to the dialogue or conversation, that inner awareness going on within our own minds. So the first element of active listening is to be aware, innerly aware of the dialogue going on inside our minds and trying to focus it. which brings us to the second step of active listening, an emptying of self. As important as it may be for the overall good of the direction process, our awareness of the intensity of our internal dialogue needs to be complemented by an active process of kenosis, or self-emptying. This process involves a movement from self-centeredness to otherness, and involves a threefold activity of awareness, detachment, and renewed focus. Which means that in the first place, we need to identify those elements of our internal dialogue, the distracting thoughts, the daydreaming, the unruly emotions that are out of place and definitely do not belong to the direction session. Secondly, we need to detach ourselves from them, from this unnecessary interference. And then thirdly, we need to fill the intervening void by refocusing our energies on the dialogue that we are engaging in with those before us. This threefold action of identification, detachment, and refocusing helps us to empty ourselves of any unnecessary distractions that may be getting in the way of our attempts at listening. It moves us out of ourselves and orients us towards those in our presence. This process of self-emptying may need to be repeated at numerous times during the direction session. Those having perfected it will perform it regularly while not needing to consciously avert to it. Thirdly comes disciplined attention. Once we are aware of this inner dialogue within our minds, once we have tried to empty ourselves of it so that we can be present to the person before us, requires disciplined attention. This kind of regard is highly focused. We try to experience those who come to us in the light of the various dimensions of their human makeup, the physical, the emotional, the intellectual, the spiritual, the social, the environmental. We try to experience the person on each of these levels of their makeup, and in doing so, we seek to relate to the various segments of their lives to the whole, and vice versa. We want to listen to and engage the whole person, and we try to do all of this and so that we can listen to truly what they are saying to us. So we ask appropriate questions such as, what is the feeling behind the thoughts that you have shared? What would your friends think about what you have just shared? What would God have to say about it? Doing so gives them a valuable filter through which the conversation of direction passes. So we try as best as possible to be focused on the person before us. Which moves to the fourth stage of active listening, which is passive reception. Once we are focused on the person, we then receive all that the person is sharing with us and try to be conscious and take in the person on each one of the levels I have just mentioned of his or her human makeup. Only after we have given those seeking guidance this highly focused attention can we go to the heart of the listening process and engage what is typically referred to as passive reception. And for this to happen, we must do our best to empty ourselves so that we can welcome the thoughts, words, feelings of those seeking guidance with unconditional positive regard. We do this, we receive these insights with respect and are careful not to make any judgments that would get in the way of the process of self-revelation. Passive reception is an ascetical practice that requires openness to others and the willingness to simply be in another's presence. It requires patience and long-suffering, the kind that is willing to suffer the tediousness of the present moment for the sake of a higher good. And here, being in another person's presence takes precedence over acting. We listen to our clients, we listen to those coming to us, not in a superficial way, but from the heart. We receive everything that is said and not said into ourselves and allow it to penetrate the very core of our being. And this leads to the next stage, the fifth stage of active listening, simple understanding. The listening process continues with a movement from reception to synthesis. After we have allowed those seeking guidance to enter within themselves and penetrate their hearts, we must give time to gather all that we have heard, the various elements of what has been said, and taken into a coherent whole. This part of the process is more intuitive than discursive. It requires quiet, attentive listening to what has been shared within our hearts, within one's heart, and attempt to grasp what is from the other perspective's experience. This understanding is simple because it does not seek to analyze what is said, but merely to hold it in itself and relish it as an authentic expression of another's self. It is silent because it seeks to understand what has been shared. It is a simple silence that speaks volumes, one that tells the other person that you are truly listening, not simply waiting for a pause in the conversation so that you can add your own two thoughts. It seeks to assimilate what we have heard and carry it in our hearts as a cherished offering to another. It is a genuine expression of self as a gift from one person to another. The simple understanding is the outcome of the authentic reception of that gift, which then moves us to the sixth stage of active listening, open acknowledgement. Once we have become aware of the dialogue in ourselves, have emptied ourselves, and have focused on the person, have received all that the person has shared, and have synthesized within us in a moment of understanding, then comes the moment, stage number 6, of open acknowledgement. An understanding heart, however, is not enough. If it is to bear fruit, the process of listening must lead us to acknowledgement of what we have heard. And we so tell the person before us by simply reflecting back what we have heard to the best of our ability with an opening like this. So what am I hearing is, or is this what you mean when you say? In fact, only when we are able to articulate our intuition of the whole will those seeking guidance be able to affirm whether or not we have actually understood. We ask questions like, am I on target here? Have I left anything out? We provide many, many opportunities for the person coming to us for guidance to adjust what we have said so that it conforms more deeply to their own experience. And which leads us to the seventh and final stage of active listening, humble recognition. Once met with a genuine attempt on our part to understand their experience, those seeking guidance find it easier to discern the truth about themselves. They may not like what we have reflected back to them, and at the outset maybe very well react against it by telling us, well, that's not exactly what we said, or we've gotten it wrong, or that we have left something out. But if they are faithful to the direction process, however, and if they have sincerely listened with their hearts, they will recognize eventually the truth about what has been said and be willing to take whatever steps may be required of them. At this point, we have done all that we could to help those seeking guidance get in touch with and examine and take ownership of their own experience. So these 7 characteristics of the listening process demonstrate the deep spiritual moorings of the skill and why good listeners are so very difficult to come by. Let us close with some reflection questions. How do you listen to someone who does not want to be listened to? How do you slow a person down so that silence may penetrate the ceaseless flow of thought that holds him or her captive? What does active listening mean when the person before you cannot separate herself or himself from the daily events that victimize him or her? How can you gradually wean a person away from the chaotic flow of external events that help him or her to construct a meaningful narrative of his or her life. As difficult as it may be, could active listening be the key to a person's spiritual growth?